It seems that Southern Television in the UK was once the platform used by an intelligence to predict the fall of humankind if we didn't change our selfish and violent ways, and encouraged humanity to evolve. The intelligence's name shows up in the speculative folklore of post-World War I Germany, as its messages were similar to those supposedly received by an extraterrestrial contactee in the United States. Before we get into this story, remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you're notified when new content is uploaded. On November the 26th, 1977, the Hampton transmitter in southern England was hijacked. People watching the news listened for almost 6 minutes to a speaker claiming to be Vrillin, a representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command.
Settlement based on one man, one vote. But, he says, there are conditions. These include stopping the execution of all captured prisoners of war, allowing guerrillas to stake on negotiations, being arrested. In Australia, Mr. Kerry Packer's cricketers are still pleading the right yesterday's High Court decision, which lifted the ban on them playing in Test matches.
This is the voice of Allah, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you.
As he invited humanity to abandon weapons and achieve higher states of evolution. Understandably, this caused alarm in many viewers, and the local authorities were flooded with panic callers. Later investigations concluded that the interruption came from a nearby unauthorized transmitter. The culprit was never identified, leaving some to wonder if the voice came from an actual extraterrestrial source or an ultraterrestrial intelligence. The name this intelligence went by has much darker and nefarious roots than the message of enlightenment would have viewers believe, stemming all the way back to a so-called master race of Aryans, a driving idea behind the Nazi Party. As early as 1871, science fiction was gaining in popularity. One little-known UK book was Edward Bulwer Lytton's Vril, the Power of the Coming Race. The story revolves around Aryans who had been living inside of a hollow earth until they decided to conquer the surface. The villains used follow staffs or wands to direct an invisible force that they called Vril. In the story, it could heal or cause devastation. The book was popular enough to catch the attention of the founder of a once popular religious movement, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a Ukrainian mystic who would go on to form the Theosophical Society in 1875, read the story and related it to her own ideas of what she called Akasha. She said that this was a real spiritual, primordial, and invisible force that permeated space and time and could be harnessed by people. With this stamp of legitimacy, concept would go on to be included in a book of speculative and supernatural topics. In 1960, the French book The Morning of the Magicians was published. The authors presented folklore that there was an inner circle in the secret Thule Society called the Society of Truth. Their purpose, it was written, was to legitimize Vril so that it could be used as an energy source for UFOs. The book was translated into English and available in the UK 3 years later. The secret society did exist in post-World War I Berlin. Its members were composed of higher-ups of the German Workers' Party. Their principles pushed the agenda of the supposed superiority of an Aryan race that had originated from a lost continent that their mystics called Hyperborea, not in a hollow earth. The 1962 German translation of The Morning of the Magicians would influence the post-World War II Landing Group. They were a neo-Volkish organization and would go on to be responsible for many tales of Nazi UFOs. They would go on to push the agenda that through German channelers, Germany had UFOs before World War II, and some had even escaped on the crafts before the fall of the Nazi Party. According to lore, in 1919, a channeler by the name of Maria Orsi met with prominent members of the Thule and Black Sun societies to reveal that she had been in psychic contact with the mysterious beings from a planet orbiting the star Aldebaran in the Taurus constellation. She told the men that the messages received were revealing information on energy independence with Vril. The Black Sun Society was a terrifying attempt on the Landing Group to draw parallels to one of the war's most evil men, Heinrich Himmler. He was the head of the SS, and between 1936 and 1942, their headquarters was Castle Weibelsberg. On the marble floor of the Northern Tower, he had ordered the mosaic of a large black sun run. That symbol has since been connected with the SS's atrocities, but is still used by some modern neo-Volkish groups. According to their lore, Maria and another channeler that went by the name of Sigrun would be joined by other women who were gifted at channeling and would receive volumes of strange information. According to the otherworldly intelligences, there were 2 planets capable of sustaining advanced life orbiting Aldebaran. using vril. People from both planets had set up colonies on Earth and would later become known as ancient Sumerians. Those still on those planets allegedly started providing the women with information on how to construct UFOs and fuel them with vril. It was alleged that the information was viable enough to create a number of UFOs, including the infamous Die Glocke. Winfried Otto Schumann was a physicist who would later be brought over to the United States under an assumed name via Operation Paperclip. He was said to have spearheaded the construction of UFOs based on the channeled information and diagram. The landing group would continue to push UFO propaganda, saying that the channelers escaped Earth, and some high-ranking Nazi officials escaped the Allied nations right before the fall of the Nazi Party. It was said that in March 1945, the channelers would use one of the UFOs to travel to the planet from which they had been receiving telepathic communication. Other higher-ups had used UFOs to travel to a secret base under the center of the Antarctic tundra called New Swabia. In 1947, 2 years after the fall of the Nazi Party, a man in California would allegedly start channeling off-world intelligences that had connections to the ancient Mesopotamian beings spoken of by the German channelers. In his 1952 book, I Wrote a Flying Saucer, George Van Tassel wrote that he had began channeling an intelligence called Ashtar, who supposedly told him that the Bible was a tool developed by extraterrestrials to help humanity evolve. He moved to Giant Rock, California in 1947 and set up the Ministry of Universal Wisdom Movement. At its peak in 1959, hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world came to his conferences. Ashtar was possibly inspired by Ishtar, the Akkadian name for the Sumerian goddess of love and war, Inanna. This deity came from the same culture of supposed extraterrestrials that the channelers had been allegedly told had traveled from planets orbiting Alderaan. Some argue that the message that interrupted the news was inspired by one of the three books. In 1976, George wrote his last book, When Stars Look Down. That same year, Zecharia Sitchin wrote The 12th Planet. In it, he proposed that the Anunnaki, or Mesopotamian sky deities, including Ishtar, were from another planet called Nibiru. Was the signal interruption on the day of the result of an extraterrestrial intelligence, an ultraterrestrial trying to communicate from the superspectrum and into the electromagnetic spectrum, or just a person with too much free time on their hands? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you like the content, consider hitting that share button and letting your friends know about this channel.